You've been in the national mind since you were born, just because of your heritage, your family. And here you are serving the nation as a congressman and realizing that you've got some mental health issues that are holding you back and creating a risky life for you. When did you realize that was going to be a challenge that you needed to address?
Well, they say the single characteristic for both mental illness and addiction is the lack of insight. So I spent my whole life not understanding how big a problem I had. And I kept thinking I could control it, I could manage it. And I grew up in a family where that was the model. The model is if you have an issue, you try to self-medicate, you try to work around it, you don't ever tackle it. And so I really thought, and of course our medical system doesn't help matters because they treat these things as acute episodic conditions and they don't treat them as chronic illnesses. And so I went to rehab at 17 for addiction. I got out and I thought I was all better. When I got elected to Congress, because I had overcome the public stigma of having been an addict, right? Because I had won in an election after that had come out because the guy I had been in drug rehab with wrote a story in the National Enquirer about how he had been in drug rehab with me and put my picture on the cover of National Enquirer. And so that actually, at the moment, was the worst thing in my life because I thought it was going to spell the end of my political career. And it turned out to be the best thing in my life because it meant that I no longer had to keep it under wraps. I could be much more open. And I ended up becoming the sponsor of the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, which was kind of our medical civil rights bill for mental health and addiction, simply because my skeletons were more out of the closet and I didn't have a problem kind of being the first name on the bill, which a lot of other members really were more reticent to because they didn't have people outing them in the National Enquirer. Right. But I'd say the reason I ultimately got sobriety was because it was that moment of clarity where I just had a glimmer of insight that this life that I was living was going to really crash. And it was after my father's death. I was talking to a good friend of his, and I just suggested, maybe I should leave Congress. And he immediately recommended that I go and tell Nancy Pelosi. And I'm like, I'm talking about it with you. It's like kind of a confidential conversation. He said, but you should go and tell Nancy. And of course, I was still in a kind of delusion that, I didn't know really what was going on. So I went to the floor, and like an idiot, I said, hey, Nancy, I think I'm going to leave Congress. And she said, well, let me help you figure out your next steps. And then, of course, it was done, because once I had told someone, I mean, like, there was no turning this clock back. And that ended up being a great thing for me, because once I left Congress, the floor dropped out from underneath me. I didn't have a staff. I didn't have a title. I wasn't important anymore. I didn't have a future. This is all what went through my mind. And so all I had to do was go to 12-step recovery. And I did that for a year. And once I got that under my belt, life started to happen for me. I got married, started having children, wrote this book, and then started getting invited on the Dr. Oz show to talk about it.